We've had a slight change to the agenda. Anthony's had to shoot off to some emergency. He was last seen getting changed in a phone box, ripping open his shirt and putting a cape on. Should probably lose the superhero references and leave them for the technical user group, I think. But, so I'm going to introduce Matt to the stage to come on and talk about the digital trends of 2013 and how we can make best use of those.
Thanks. Right, so we're on the last leg, so I won't talk for too long. I can hear them opening the bill already. I can sense you're desperate to get out there. But I was asked to talk today about a few digital trends, things that we're hearing from our customers and partners that are kind of impacting the way that they think about digital marketing. So I'm going to go into too much detail. Some of these you've probably seen before, but it's aimed to kind of promote a bit of thought, really. Think about a different way of looking at how you might approach some of the problems and how the technology can solve it. So I guess one of the overarching questions is, there's lots of trends out there, there's lots of things changing. Are your technology plans keeping pace? And we like to think that Sitecore can help you do that. So some of the things I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to touch on mobile, because it's very prevalent right now. I'm going to talk a little bit about being real time. I'm going to talk about building community, and we're going to touch on gamification and see how that applies to the wider story. And I'm going to finish with a little bit about social, and maybe try and get you to think about social in a slightly different way. So let's start with mobile. Kind of saying this is about the rise of the mobile, but let's be honest. It kind of seems like every year is the year of the mobile. The truth is, every year has been the year of the mobile. A few years ago, being connected used to mean sat in front of a PC, listening to the really sweet hum of a 56K dial-up modem. Nowadays, we're effortlessly connected, right? We all have mobile phones, we all have iPads. We just take it for granted. We're able to have meaningful conversations with consumers at any time of the day. As marketers, it means that we're able to learn about the behavior of our customer base and refine our message. The use of mobile is driving other trends as well. Things like convergence, we've got the world's first camera phone there in the top right, big data, cloud services, all of these different things are very strong trends, but you'll find that it's mobile that's driving a lot of this. If you think of near-field communication, mobile payments, we're hearing a lot about this right now, but it's mobile. It's the use of these devices that are really driving these trends. So is mobile that big a deal? I'm sure you've heard this statistic before, but let's try and address that by comparing mobile phones to toothbrushes. There are actually more mobile phones on the planet than there are toothbrushes, which is a staggering fact, right? This actually got me thinking, are the two linked? If we're not so interested in, if we're all effortlessly connected and don't need to speak face to face, are we that bothered about our oral hygiene anymore? Perhaps not, but I'll leave that for you to work out. Mobile devices are becoming the primary interface for most people into the web. Many marketers are now actually considering a mobile-first strategy. In fact, we're so attached to our mobile devices, there's even a medical condition to explain how we feel when we're without it. Apparently, a lot of the population suffer from this condition, and it's called nomophobia. You can go and look it up. There's a medical condition for it. There's even a website where you can go and get some help and maybe share your pains with people, in a similar afflicted level. But it's a big deal, right? We rely on our mobile devices. We use them for all sorts of things, and we take them for granted. And for a marketer, it's a huge opportunity. So if we dig a little bit deeper into what we should think about and the challenges of delivering content in such a connected world, I think that broadly speaking, there's kind of three areas to consider. First one is location. We need a platform as marketers that's considerate of where people are. That we can have relevant conversations with people regardless of where they are in their day. We should in fact be able to offer an optimized experience that's considerate of where they are. Think of things like geolocation, IP lookups, things like that. The second point to consider around mobile is devices. There are now a ton of devices appearing in the market all the time, and these represent new ways for people to consume information and new ways for us to tap into the emotions of users and new ways for us to be relevant. As a digital marketer, again, we need a platform that should be able to offer an optimized experience regardless of the device that people are using. And Anthony touched on some of this stuff when we were talking about mobile and how you can use Sitecore to deliver those types of engagements. The third point to consider is people. This one's really important, right? Everyone is different. And with the increase in location and where we're consuming data, the devices we're consuming it on, we're seeing an increased demand for content and experiences to be tailored to an individual's requirements. The truth is people still want access to our content, but they want it on their terms. So these are all very relevant considerations in how we deliver content. We obviously have to think about things like authentication across these platforms, but that's a relatively easy technology problem to overcome. But if we're able to tailor the experience to correspond to the device that people are accessing our site on, we can start to do some very, very clever things. Just by knowing what device they're accessing our website from, it's giving us some implicit information. They're implying what they're looking to do in terms of their engagement. We can make some assumptions around that. So if they're coming in from what we'd call a second screen, an iPad or something like that, we'll know it's likely to be a 15-minute engagement, something like that. They'll be consuming information, not necessarily interested in putting too much in. The same on a mobile device, it's an even shorter window of interaction. It's a 3-minute engagement. You know, we're not likely to be wanting a deep immersive experience. We probably just want access to some relevant information and consume that quickly. So we can start to really tailor that experience through personalization and understanding what device that they're coming in on. This gets even more interesting if we're able to get these people to sign into a website. Because if we're linked to a CRM system, again, we're able to personalize even further, and we're having access to what we'd call explicit intent. So where we actually know stuff about this visitor, we're linking it once again to a CRM profile. They've told us about their buying behaviors, maybe previous purchase, and we can customize that experience even further. And there's a third layer to this as well that we'll talk about a bit later, which is the social element. So again, through social connector and such things like that, we can actually access their social profiles and start to learn a little bit more about what it is that they're doing in their personal life, what kind of things do they like, what kind of friends do they have. And again, we're able to have an extremely tailored experience for these people. It all kind of boils back to the mobile and the proliferation of these devices. So as we start to come to terms with the challenges associated to these varied circumstances which people are consuming information and the ways that we communicate with the audience, we also need to be considerate of something else. That is the fact that we need to be real time. And we have all these many opportunities to have these conversations across different devices, across different locations. We need to be relevant and we need to be real time. The point behind this trend is the fact that when things happen in the real world, they're happening simultaneously on the web. Consumers expect organizations they deal with to be relevant. And as an organization, we should be able to respond to news within the industry or demands from our consumers on the fly. With the advancement of technology, we're able to appeal to people's emotions. And we can have meaningful conversations that extend just beyond selling a product or a service, helping to build advocates within this community or customer base. Being real time is not just about the here and now or responding to posts or tweets or relevant news. It's also about being conscious of where the user is in their interaction journey with you. And this is something that we refer to as lifetime customer journey, and it maps onto the customer experience model that Chris spoke about earlier as well. And we kind of think of these interactions as somebody becoming a lifetime customer. So what do we mean by lifetime customer? Well, a lifetime customer is really just an advocate of your brand. We don't necessarily mean that this is somebody that's going to be a customer for their entire life. It's more about them being a customer for a set period of engagement. So if I give you an example, if you think of a car manufacturer, it's not unrealistic to think of a customer, them having a customer for 30 to 40 years. They have a high amount of loyalty. But if you map that against the car insurance company, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to stay with the same insurance company for that length of time. And they both represent independent challenges. They need to be relevant throughout that period of engagement. Again, if we think of the car manufacturer example, if I've just bought a new car, it's pointless that car manufacturer sending me, or the dealer sending me information on great quotes, great finance when I've just purchased the vehicle. They should be sending me information about how I can share this with my friends, boast about how fast my car goes, share the speeding tickets I've just got. And equally, if you think about an insurance company, again, it's not a deep immersive experience. I need a quote, I want it quickly, I want to get in, I want to get out. We need to be very considerate of this. A good example of an organization being real-time and being relevant I'm sure many of you are familiar with this example, but during the Super Bowl, there was a blackout. The Baltimore Ravens were playing the San Francisco 49ers, and sort of midway through the third quarter, the lights in the stadium went out. And because some brands were operating they understand the importance of real time, they had a platform set up to deliver this kind of stuff. As soon as this happened, Oreo jumped straight on it, right? And they had tweeted this message and had seen it shared over 10,000 times, all through being real time. Now that might not sound like too big a deal, but this became known as the Power Out No Problem ad. It went on to be retweeted and favorited over 18,000 times. And this is even more phenomenal when you think that brands were paying up to £2.5 million for a 30-second advert within the Super Bowl. And by being real time, by being relevant, brands were able to get in on the action for free. Now, Oreo weren't the only ones that were being a part of this. Audi were doing the same thing. But I think it's a really good example of how they can be very, very real time. So if we're saying that being real time is all about being in the here and now, and it's about effective two-way communication, a key part of any communication is listening. So this is something else that we're seeing our customers and our partners talking a lot about. The ability to just ask. Again, having a platform that's transparent. It's okay to ask your audience. It's okay not to know something, but it's not okay to not seek understanding. So whilst being real time is a great way to have conversations with your audience, it's important to remember a real world truth, and that is you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So we should really be listening to our audience and looking to see how we can learn from them. As organizations become more and more transparent, there is a real opportunity to listen and learn. It's a huge opportunity to give our consumers a voice, let them collaborate with you, with one another, and learn from that collective understanding. We can translate this into functionalities such as forums, such as live chats, such as wikis. And the whole methodology behind things like wikis, behind people sharing information, us being able to take that and learn from it, I find quite fascinating. And if you grow on the wiki a little bit, you can kind of dig a bit deeper into the methodology and understand it even further. So the first wiki was actually built in March 1995 by a guy called War Cunningham. Now, it was a research project. It was an effort to get people to collaborate, and he basically invited people to collaborate and talk, and together they kind of solved the problem and ended up being able to tell a whole story. Now, that was in March. By April that same year, the wiki had been copied, replicated, and was becoming more and more prevalent across the web. Why was that so successful, and why does it work so well? I think the fact is it taps into a core behavioral trait, and that's that we as human beings like to belong to tribes. We recognize that a collective is more powerful than an individual, and that collective knowledge is way more powerful than we could ever provide on our own. And we've known this for a long time, way before we ever connected a computer to a modem. And in fact, Walt Cunningham again was quoted in the early 80s as saying, the best way to get the right answer on the internet is not to ask a question, it's to post the wrong answer. People will want to respond and collaborate and give you that right answer. And this has actually become known as Cunningham's Law, and this is actually what Wikipedia, one of probably the best known wikis, is actually built upon. And if we want further proof of how powerful this is, take a look at Wikipedia. You know, sometimes we overlook it, but it has over 310,000 editors. It's available in 285 languages, and it gets over 1 billion edits. People are willing to contribute if you give them a platform and the ability to do it. If you want further proof of how powerful building communities is, if there's any Star Trek fans among you, then you'll know that possibly the deadliest foe that Starfleet ever faced was the Borg. And why were the Borg so powerful? Because they operated as a collective. They truly understood that the power of many is far more powerful than the power of one. Being able to tap into your audience and provide real insight can play into some of the other areas that we've mentioned as well. It helps build advocacy, it can help you be real time, it can help you be relevant. A more real-world example of someone that's taking this type of functionality above and beyond would be Starbucks, and if you look at what they're doing here, they've created an area where people can sign in and share their thoughts. So it's this idea of a wiki again, but expanded larger. And some of these numbers are phenomenal, right? You look at this, they've got 16,000 people there giving them suggestions on how to improve their Starbucks card. I mean, this stuff is just gold, right? They've opened a platform up and asked the audience to tell them how to improve their brand. They're crowdsourcing the advancement of their brand. Very, very clever. So the next theme I'm going to talk about is this idea of being playful. And again, this maps into a number of other things. And hopefully you can kind of see some of the technology that's sitting underneath some of these principles, some of these behaviors that we're seeing in the market at the moment. Kind of called this trend, let's play. But most of you will know this as gamification. I'm not even sure that's actually a real word, but we'll stick with gamification for the time being. So gamification is more than just thinking about everything as a game. It's about learning from the principles behind gaming and applying it to our website. And you'd be surprised how many marketers are using this effectively today. If we really break down what we mean by gamification, I like to think of it in these 4 ways, the 4 M's, mystery, mastery, meaning, and membership. And I'll go into a bit more detail in each of those in a moment. But to really get something from this trend, from gamification, we need to really start thinking about it as something beyond games, as I said before. Think of simple things like avatars, think of things like gamer tags, or even just simply knowing that we as human beings respond to challenges. So just understanding the principles behind gamification can really help us build an engaging platform and an engaging experience. An example of where we're seeing this happen already is if you look at the profile complete bar on LinkedIn, which was added a few years ago. Apparently this, I'm not a coder, so don't hold me to this, but it took around 30 minutes to build the profile complete bar, and they had a huge uptake in people completing profiles because it was driving that competitive spirit within people that's inherent in us all. Very clever. So why is gamification such an effective strategy for business? So you really need to understand, first of all, why gamification is so popular. Does anyone know what this is? Has anyone seen similar presentations to this? I'll tell you, this is the face of somebody on the verge of an epic win. An epic win is an outcome that's so extraordinarily positive that you had no idea it was possible until you achieved it. It's almost beyond the threshold of your imagination, and when you get there, you're so shocked to realize what you're actually capable of. These are powerful emotions that we're able to invoke through gaming. And I know this is kind of going off a little bit, but there's a way that we can kind of tap into this and learn from it. Imagine if we were able to invoke this type of emotion through an online engagement. How powerful could that be? And just to kind of give you some insight into how serious a trend this is and why we should actually really start thinking about it. So I've written 10,000 on the slide here. Why is 10,000 such an important number? Well, let me give you a couple of reasons why. There was some recent research done at Carnegie Mellon University, and it states that the average young person in a country with a reasonably strong gaming community will spend around 10,000 hours by the time they're 21 playing games. So this is the generation that's coming through. Gaming is a big deal. Another way to look at this is if you went to school in the US and you went from 5th grade to high school graduation, and you had a 100% attendance record, you would have been at school for around 10,080 hours. So 80 hours longer than kids are playing games. It's pretty scary. Interestingly enough, 10,000 as well is also the number of hours. If anyone reads Malcolm Gladwell, he's written a book, and he states in that book that 10,000 hours is the number of hours if you spend studying any subject up to the age of 21, you will be a master of that subject. So it's, we're basically churning out the next generation of kids who are masters at gaming. They understand these principles and they respond to it. So as marketers, I think there's an opportunity there. So gamification empowers people. We believe that we can save the world. We believe that we can be the best person that we can. We can be a hero. Every time you achieve something in a game, it's recognized, you're rewarded. Gamification brings out the best in people, and for many people, it's an escape. For marketers, it's also a way to interact with our customers in a way that we may not necessarily be able to do in the real world, right? It should represent an opportunity for us to be the best that we can, empower people, and help people to become the best that they can be. We can make heroes through our digital marketing efforts. We can help people change the world. We can empower people. We can potentially build trust, loyalty, and advocacy in a way that we just can't do in the real world. And I think that's the real opportunity in taking some of these principles of gamification. So again, let's try and split this down a little bit more so maybe it make a bit more sense. So let's look at those 4 M's that I mentioned before. So the first one that I spoke about, or the first one that I mentioned, was mystery. So think about the element of surprise. Think of the way that games entice you in. We should be able to do the same with our digital marketing strategy. Sometimes what you say has more impact, sometimes what you don't say, sorry, has more impact than what you do say. So being able to entice people in to sign up, you know, become a hero, help us solve this problem, these are real strategies that we're seeing brands use now, and there's a ton of technology that we provide that helps promote this. You just need to think about it slightly differently. The next, the second M is mastery, and this is just tapping into the fact that everybody wants to be the best at something, right? We love to get a bit of recognition for our achievements. We should be able to reward people that contribute the most. You know, allow users to tell their friends about the things they've achieved through your platform or their interaction with you. Offer league tables for people that are, the most active on your site. These kind of things. There's a lot that we can learn from this. Rewarding people for their efforts. Much like LinkedIn sent emails around to people to let them know that they're in the top 1% or 5% of profiles viewed. Don't know if any of you received those emails. I didn't, but many of my friends did, and they were very, very happy to tell me about it. So it's powerful, right? People want to show that they're the master of something. They want recognition of status. The third, mastery again. Another good example of mastery is Nike Plus. Again, I'm sure you have friends that use this application, but you know, the fuel band showing achievements, people able to show that they've run cities. People love sharing this information. It's tapping into that same behavioral trait that people want to be the master of something, and we should, as marketers, recognize this. I think try and wrap it into our strategy. So the next one I'm going to talk about is meaning. So this is again where I think we can learn a lot from gamification. Games are really great at telling a story. They make you feel like you're part of something. They make you feel like you're part of a journey. And this is something that we can translate into our websites and into the interaction we're trying to build. We should make people feel like they're part of something. Why can't we make them feel like they're part of our company mission and really bring them on that journey with us to achieve a common goal? The next one is membership, and this is really powerful, right? Making people feel like they belong to a group of like-minded people, offering secure areas to your website, maybe extranet style functionality, things like this. And a great example of gamification and where this can be really, really powerful is Club Penguin. And if any of you have small children, I'm sure that you're familiar with it. But this is quite a phenomenal story, right? It's just they've tapped into gamification and they've built a membership website. And literally in the time that it's taken me to run through this presentation, around 21,000 kids will have logged on to this website. 21,000, that's huge, right? So this is again a website using gamification to the maximum. And there's no reason why we can't look to learn from these types of companies. So that was a bit curveball, I understand, but you can see where I'm coming from. There's technology that can help you to really take advantage of these types of trends. Gamification is a big one. The last thing I'm going to talk about is social, and you've heard a little bit about it today, some of the functionality that we have and being able to tap into social networks to pull out behavioral patterns, to pull in information, data about our audience, or even publish content out through social channels to build some of the other things that I spoke about, community, advocacy. Well, if we think about social in its entirety, there are obviously a ton of social networks out there. And when we think about the importance of social media in our digital marketing strategy, we tend to think of those standard platforms, or maybe a subset of the 107 or whatever there are on this slide here. But I think it's far more than just having a Facebook page or a Twitter account. I think that if we can learn from the methodologies applied in social networks and apply them to our business, or look at the way that people communicate on these platforms, we can really learn a lot and improve our brand and reputation. Using social media in a smart way allows us to draw on real insight and feed that into the way that we learn and adapt our messaging, much like you've heard earlier about us being able to put in content from a social website and personalize the experience based on that. And some of the analytics that Chris showed there in the end of his presentation, being able to pull in that kind of information and make informed decisions is incredibly powerful. If we can offer syndicated sign-on, then it's a really, really interesting feed for these personalization elements. And all this stuff is actually very, very relevant. But when I'm sort of hearing people talk about social media like this, it's kind of pretty much where I crash. You know, I mean, they're really great uses of social media. It's all very valid, but it kind of now feels like social media 101, right? We all know that we should be interacting with these platforms in this way. But for whatever reason, quite often we don't take the use of social media as far as we should. And a lot of that is down to the fact that we can't quantify the value behind some of these social platforms. So at Sitecore, we were thinking maybe it's a time that we kind of have a bit of a reboot on the way that we think about the use of social media. It's cheesy, right? It perforates so many areas of our business that we're starting to think about it slightly differently. And one thing that we're kind of considering is this idea of social leadership. Kind of using social media to go that little bit further and apply that little bit extra when you're engaging with customers to try and really distinguish you against your competition. The same way that if you shop in a real-world store, you react better to the helpful and friendly shop attendant than you do to somebody that's grumpy, not interested in talking to you. Maybe we can use social media to have that add that little extra layer of that little extra layer of something special. In today's world, being first mover doesn't really offer you that much of a jump on the competition. For example, most retailers can see the shirt that you're wearing today and have it on their rail in 5 weeks. Having a great idea isn't necessarily going to give you much of an advantage. What really gives you that extra piece is the service that you provide around those products. And in the online world, perhaps social media is the way that we can do it. The effective use of social media and the adoption of methodologies and principles behind the success of these platforms can deliver real business benefit. A lot of the time, the reason why we're not taking advantage of this is because we can't see or quantify that value back to the business. And this really got us thinking about how we can help our customers do this. So at Sitecore, what we've done is we've commissioned a little bit of research that will be available to you all fairly shortly. And we did a study where we took the top FTSE 350 businesses here in the UK, so that's the FTSE 100 and the FTSE 250. And we kind of looked at how they were using social media and how it was impacting their business as a whole. There's some pretty interesting stuff there. We looked at how they were tackling things like brand and reputation management. And we kind of whittled that 350 down a bit further, just so you're aware. And we looked at only the companies that had a B2C engagement, because that was where we could really quantify it further. That left us with around 113 companies, something like that. And we found some pretty interesting stuff. And we kind of started to segment that data in a number of ways. And we were looking at which of these companies were really providing what we're kind of saying social leadership. So where were they using social media to really improve their brand, and where was it really being driven hard through their whole organization? And a quick kind of example of what we mean by social leadership, the companies we saw as doing it really well, using social really well. It's about somebody in a leadership position being active on these social networks and actually providing a voice back to the consumer. And when we looked at these companies, again, this research kind of segmented these 113 companies into sort of 4 areas. So we had companies that we said were actually using this social leadership approach. They were heavily engaged in the use of social media, and there was a prominent member of that organization actively involved. We then had some companies that were taking a kind of one-way individual approach. So they weren't necessarily responding to things, but it was apparent that they were pushing information out to their client base. Then we had companies that had a corporate two-way approach, where there's a PR firm or a marketing team that are just handling all of the social media, but it's pretty faceless. And then the 4th bracket, as you'd expect, was just the companies that had no engagement at all. And of those 113 companies that we looked at, amazingly, only 7% of those companies were seen to take what we would call this social leadership approach, where they had true buy-in at the top level of that organization and were seen to be really prominently using social media to improve their online and brand reputation. Is it because they don't have the right tools, or is it because there's not enough buy-in? Well, we think we've got an answer for both. And this study's helping with the latter. There's a little quote here that I love whenever I'm talking about the use of social media, and I'm afraid it's not a profound philosopher. It's a cartoonist from New York, a guy called Hugh MacLeod. You can read it, but the most important bit is just this bottom line that I've highlighted. When we're talking about social engagement, this conversation is going to happen whether you want to join in or not, and you're better off having a voice, right? So let's look at some of the other statistics that this survey threw out. Hopefully you can see why we're finding this stuff pretty interesting. So again, we drill further into these companies, these 113 companies. And when it comes to Facebook, we found that actually only 79 of those firms were actively engaged in Facebook, and only 8 of them had somebody from a prominent leadership position actively engaging in that conversation too. We looked at Twitter. As you'd expect, the numbers were slightly higher. 97 of those companies had an active Twitter account and were talking to their customers, but only 11 sort of CEOs or people in a leadership position were also actively involved in that. So again, is this really perforating the whole business? We're not sure. YouTube, there were around 80 firms, 0 people in a leadership position were actively involved in any form of YouTube, so promoting their brand through these channels. And blogs, this was the one that surprised us the most. Only 35 companies have a blog out of those 113, and only 4 CEOs are actively on that blog. And I'm sure you can think of examples of organizations out there where they get amazing responses from having someone prominent talking about their business. Think Tesco's, think of the CTO for Tesco's. So we then did something else, right? So we looked at these companies and tried to map how they are actually performing. So what this information is showing here is we looked at the compound annual growth rates of those 113 companies that we surveyed, and we looked at how they were performing between these 2 time periods, between 2000 and 2012. The companies that were seen to have that social leadership, that had somebody prominent actively involved in social, it was clear that they had a way to manage it, they showed a much higher annual growth rate compared to some of the other categories. And kind of what got even more interesting was when we refined those numbers a bit further and said, okay, well, let's look at a 2-year period. And those numbers went up again. So what's driving this? You could say that the advancement of some of these social platforms and the technology to have those conversations, those that were already embracing it were in the best position to capitalize on it and are able to push even more growth. You've got the corporate 2-way pushing through even harder as well now, and a drop in the others that are just having these one-way conversations. Really interesting statistics, and I think really quite thought-provoking. And this is something that we're quite passionate about trying to drive through into the market and help you guys, help our partners to sort of really help understand the importance of the use of social and the importance of having a platform that sits behind it and allows you to manage those interactions with the right level of governance so you can have prominent people actively involved. Now, this is a survey that will be available over the next month or so, so keep an eye out for it. This is all kind of under the covers at the moment, so I can't share these numbers with you on this slide deck, but I can share the rest of it. But there'll be something coming out pretty soon where you can see a lot more of the information behind this, and hopefully we can help you build that case to push social on to where it needs to go. That's the end of my waffle. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them, or if you just want beer, let's just go get beer.
Any questions? Thanks very much, Matt. Any questions for Matt at all? No, so I'm going to wrap up a little bit now. I just want to say thank you all for coming. Thank you all for supporting this a little bit more. And the idea of today is, of course, for you to learn a little bit at Sitecore. That's why we do the roadmap at the beginning of some of the stuff Chris was covering, but also to give you some ideas, some tools that you can take away, and maybe you go and speak to your partners and you have those conversations. Just a bit thought-provoking. It's completely reliant on the success and your feedback. So let us know, when what you think went well, whether the seats were comfortable enough, whether the topic areas were good enough. I've learned a couple of things. I think Matt's imagery on his presentations is awesome. We need to improve one. I've learned that gnomophobia isn't an irrational fear of garden gnomes. And I've also learned that if I ever go shopping in Target, I probably need to be a bit careful about what I buy. So without further ado, if we head next door for a beer, find one of us, have a chat with us, talk to each other, and share ideas. Thanks for coming.